Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be comparing a 2022 Toyota Corolla Hatchback to a 2022 Honda Civic Hatchback, and by the end of the video we're going to decide which automaker makes the best hatchback. Before getting this video, I do want to mention I'm going to include a link to the inventories of each of the dealerships that originally provided me with both of the cars. Check them out. And then also, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, I'm going to include a link to my car buying guide in the description down below. I will be increasing the price by a slight amount in the next few weeks, so if you want to get it at the lower price, buy it now. Let's get right into the comparison. Starting under the hood of the Civic, we have a naturally aspirated 2-liter 4-cylinder that goes through a CVT automatic transmission. It's good for 158 horsepower and then 138 pound-feet of torque. This is the most common powertrain you'll see in the Civic. You can get a turbocharged 4-cylinder with a manual, but again, like I said, this is the most common setup you'll see. Popping over to the Corolla, we have a naturally aspirated 2-liter 4-cylinder. Goes through CVT automatic transmission. It's good for 169 horsepower and then 151 pound-feet of torque. And this is also the most common powertrain you'll see. So it's funny that we have 2-liter 4-cylinders with CVTs under the hoods of both cars, but the Corolla does have more power and more torque. So just take that into account. Now, popping back over to the Civic, it basically looks like an Accord now, right? From a front-end perspective, they took a lot of style cues from the Accord, which I don't think is a bad thing. You notice that the center portion of the hood's super flat, and then you've got the body lines on either side. And then you can see the daytime running lights with the LED headlights. Definitely looks great from an aesthetic perspective. And notice everything's darkened, right? It kind of has a sportier appearance to it. You do have the Honda logo there on the front that's finished in chrome. But again, they kind of go for a sportier theme overall with the Civic, which I think looks great. And then moving from that over to the Corolla, you can see that similar with the hood, right? But notice it's kind of more rounded off, right? But they make the center portion flat, right? That's the big similarity. And coming down, you can see the daytime running lights with the headlight there, which is a projector bulb, looks great. And then you can see here with the front grille how it's all blacked out. And then notice there with the Toyota logo, still finished in chrome. And, you know, I think they're both good-looking cars from a front-end perspective, but they both kind of have just completely different aesthetics, right, with the front ends of the cars. The Corolla does look a little bit more on the aggressive side, whereas the Civic kind of looks more on the, like almost like luxury side in a sense in terms of its aesthetics is what I'd have to say. Now, coming here to the side of the Civic, you can see here with the wheel design, definitely, again, has that, more luxury type theme to it. You've got the silver there on the top with the black below that, and that's what a lot of luxury brands are doing, where they do like a lighter color on the top and then a darker color down below, just to kind of, emphasize that theme without going for like all chrome, for example. It seems like chrome's out and silver is in with cars that are trying to look more like luxury cars at this point. And other than that, just like most cars in this segment, not super wide from a tire perspective, but it's kind of what you expect. And then the Civic is front-wheel drive. Notice the mirrors, two-tone, and then you can see the chrome trim around the windows. And then you can see the side profile here, so you can now finally see the hatchback design with the Civic. And then notice that little body line there down below. Now, popping over to the Corolla, notice the wheel is all blacked out. So again, kind of going towards that sportier theme here with the Corolla. And again, front-wheel drive. And then also with the tires, they are, on the skinnier side of things. But again, expected for this segment, so nothing too crazy. And then notice how the fenders kind of pop out a little bit also on the Corolla. So again, they do a bunch of stuff to make it just appear sportier. And you can see this one's got the rails here at the top of the roof, which definitely looks cool, right? Gives it that kind of like Winter Warrior vibe. But yeah, you can see the side view here with the hatch. Again, more rounded off from a design perspective. That is for sure. And then you can see kind of the metallic flake there in the paint. Definitely looks good here in the sunlight. I will say that. Love the look of it. And another thing to mention here is you've got the bodywork there at the bottom. And you can also just see like it just looks wider, right? It just kind of has this like wider appearance because they make the hips pop out. Here's a key fob for the Civic. So you can see the lock and unlock, and then you've got the opening there for the hatch. You do have to like physically open it yourself. It's not power. It's just hydraulic. But once the hatch is open, you can see storage space in here is actually really solid. So first off, of course, you got the spare tire underneath. It's funny how that is that way. Usually you have to like lift it up, but this one it like has a little prop for itself, which is pretty cool. And it's easy to place back. And then you can see there with the cargo cover. And I think that's actually a really cool design for a cargo cover. I like that more than any other. Man, my cats are like chasing each other all over the place, running this voiceover. And then you can see there the other cargo cover at the top, and then putting it down. Yeah, pretty easy. Now going over the rest of the rear. So you can see stylistically, you've got like the kind of like light bar design back there, and then you can see the sloped window in the back. And you know what? It's interesting from a style perspective. I'll kind of get into my opinion at the end of the video. And then you can see the Civic logo, all that. But yeah, that's pretty much the back of the Civic hatchback from an aesthetic perspective. Again, notice chrome with the badges and everything, and it's kind of going more for that luxury appearance with this car rather than going for the sporty appearance. And then notice the exhaust tips don't pop out the back or anything like that, so they're not trying to like show off that it's a gas-powered car. Now popping back over to the Corolla, you guys can see here with the key fob, got the Corolla logo there. Just have the lock and unlock. They don't have any like hatch button or anything like that, but again, it's a hydraulic hatch just like what you have on the Civic. And notice that you think that the hatch button would be under the Toyota logo because it's got like that space, and Volkswagen does that with their GTI, but no, it's just at the bottom. Got the Corolla floor mat, super official, right? Spare tire, so we're equal from a spare tire perspective, right? They both got spare tires. It's an important feature to have. Now, from a storage space perspective, here's what I have to say is they both look very similar in terms of size. It seems like the Civic might have just slightly more. And the Civic just looks like it's almost like a bigger car in general. You got more of a traditional cargo cover here. Like I said, I do prefer the Civics over this cargo cover. I had this type of cargo cover, my Focus RS, and I wasn't a fan. It got in the way more often than it helped, basically. And then you can see closing it. Definitely easy, just like the Civic. Again, notice that rounded design here with the rear, again, wider with the fenders there in the back, and then you can see again with the taillight design. Everything's blacked out with this particular one. And then notice here at the bottom, looks like exhaust coverings. Looks like it, but it's not. The thing that's interesting with this car segment is they'll just have like a little, you guys can see underneath, they'll have like a little exhaust tip pop out underneath, but they'll make it look like it has exhaust coverings at the back. It's kind of an interesting thing they do to make the car look sportier. So yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I just think it's kind of, funny, right? And another thing to mention here with the Corolla is it looks like, because of the shape and everything, it makes the car look lower than the Civic. Even though ride height's going to be pretty similar, just because of how they have the shape of the car. And then here is the door panel on the back of the Civic. So you guys can see the padding there. Love the door handle. And then here are the seats. So just notice, again, this is more of like these cars, you guys see the price in a second, are more on the inexpensive side of things. So it's not going to have like the nicest interior, but you can see space back there is actually pretty good in the hatch. Not a lot of amenities back there though. Like there's not a lot happening. It's basically seats and seat belts and armrests on the door panels. So yeah, just definitely take that into account. Now popping back over to the Corolla, as you guys can see here with the door panel, looks a little bit nicer from a material standpoint, right, with the padding and all that. And then the piano, well, some of you don't like piano black trim, but I think it makes the car look nicer, even though it gets dirty very easily. And then here are the seats. So, similar setup in terms of having cloth seats and, nothing too fancy. But I do like that design in the center of the seat. I think that looks pretty cool. Then you guys can see the legroom right there, and then headroom as well. And then here is the center console. Well, kind of center console setup for the rear passengers. They at least get some storage, a couple of armrests. So you do have a few more things from an amenity perspective with the Corolla over the Civic, so that's definitely something to consider. Now popping here to the front of the Civic, this is where things get exciting for the Civic in my opinion. Again, you can see with the material use, and then notice with the windows, front two are auto, you've got your mirror adjustments, and there's a quick look at the mirrors themselves. And then here are the front seats. They do have a cool pattern there in the center of the front seats. That's definitely positive. They are manually adjustable. And then here's the pedal layout down below. And then notice with the safety tech and the stability control. And then I love the vents on the new Civic. That is a huge plus. The vents definitely look great. And then popping back over to the Corolla, you guys can see here with the door panel. Notice they've got stitching on it. It's kind of like, this one I remember was like harder to the touch at the top. So they just did the stitching to like make it look like it was nicer. But, you know, who cares? You're not really going to touch that all that much. Anyways, you guys can see the mirrors right there. And notice it says Corolla. And then you can see the front seats. So a little bit wider with the bolsters. And notice here with the pattern there in the center. And then the seats are manually adjustable just like the Civic. So nothing's changed there. And then you can see the pedal layout down below. And notice here for some of the safety tech stuff and the gas as well. And then anyways, steering wheel's manually adjustable. But let's pop back into the Civic so we can see this cool startup animation. Ooh, look at that, fancy. So here's the steering wheel in the Civic. Pretty basic from a material standpoint with this package. But notice we've got steering assist. And we also have adaptive cruise control. That's great from a safety tech perspective and a daily driver perspective as well. And then you can see over here volume controls, voice command controls, all that. Turn signal light stock, windshield wiper stock. Pretty normal stuff, right? And then you got the blacked out trim there at the bottom portion. And, you know, I think it looks, you know, pretty decent other than the basic material on the outside. Now, here is the center gauge cluster. So you've got like screen gauge and then non-screen gauge. It's kind of interesting with the setup there. And you guys can see overall, you know, looks pretty nice. I did like the previous generation Civic screen a little bit more in terms of like how it looks sportier. But this definitely looks more modern and kind of, again, more on that luxury side that they're going for. And then you can see the different drive modes you can go into as well. And so, you know, overall, I think it looks good. And so moving from that, you can see here with the center infotainment system, we got the backup camera, which, you know, pretty decent resolution, and it's got a couple different viewpoints as well with the camera. And then the trajectory lines do turn with the steering wheel. And other than that, rest of the screen, let's see. So response time's good with the buttons on this screen from what I remember. And I like to have shortcut buttons there at the bottom. That's another big plus with the screen. And, you know, overall, it's pretty easy to use. Notice you got that dial where you can twist through the things. That's also pretty cool. So if you don't want to use the touchscreen function, you don't have to. But anyways, moving down, got the cool vents again that I love with the controls that I love as well. Hazard light button there in the center. And then climate control. So single zone climate, which is kind of expected in a car of this segment. And down below, we've got our charging area with the USB and 12 volt and some extra storage space right there. And then notice the trim here around the cup hold area looks pretty good. Shifter for that CVT automatic. And then notice the different drive modes. You get your econ mode, your auto stop start, parking brake, and then brake hold. And then here's the center console. You can see that aesthetic with the cloth trim. And pretty normal glove box. And then notice again that trim that goes over the vents goes over the whole dash, which is really cool from an aesthetic perspective. And then pretty basic from a dash perspective in terms of the appearance of that. And then you do have the manual mirror dimmer. Lights here at the top. Nothing too fancy though, just regular cloth headliner. Again, we're looking at economy cars, folks. Don't expect too much. And then you guys can see the kind of out the rear window. Here's a window sticker for this. This is an LX. Like I said at the beginning of the video, these are both priced pretty similarly from an MSRP perspective. But you guys can see here the standard equipment that comes with it. And then the base price, and then total MSRP almost $24,000. Now, popping back into the Corolla. We got to say it like that because, I don't know. Because I said so. There, that's a good enough answer, right? Now, you can see the steering wheel is a little bit nicer with the materials on the outside, so that's definitely an upgrade. And then notice here with our cruise control, lane departure. Now, I don't think this has the steering assist like the Honda. It just has like regular lane departure, so that's something to consider. Got a turn signal light stock there in the back with the paddle shifters too. Look at that. We got lots of fancy stuff happening here in the Corolla. But again, it's a CVT, so it's not like the most responsive with the paddles. And notice windshield wiper stock, turn signal, light stock we mentioned earlier. So, it's got everything you need. Now, from a gauge cluster perspective, it does look more basic than what you have in the Civic, right? A little bit more, well, it literally is analog gauges. I was going to say it looks more analog because it is more analog, right? And then you've got like that screen there off to the side. So, yeah, I do prefer the aesthetic that the Civic has from a gauge cluster perspective. It just looks a little bit more modern, a little bit classier as well. And then I guess the other thing to consider is just usability, right? The screen's just smaller, and so it's not quite as practical, I suppose, is the best way to put it. Infotainment system. So first off, camera system, pretty similar, right, from a camera perspective. But I noticed no lines turning with the steering wheel. That's kind of annoying. So that's another thing to consider, I suppose. And then as for the rest of the infotainment system, it's just easy to use. Got shortcut buttons. Response time, I feel like it's pretty similar between both of them. So I don't really have an infotainment system preference. They both are pretty equal in my eyes. So can't go wrong with that. They both have little, well, I mean, in modern standards they're little, but like in, historical standards, these screens are huge. Like, it's crazy that every single car now has a big screen. Think about that for a second. Think about that. It's kind of crazy. Normal vents, sadly. Single zone climate, right? Again, it's kind of typical for this segment. And then you guys can see kind of like the padding down below. And then notice extra storage space, right? And then you got some more stitching. We got our sport mode right there, which will pop up there in the screen when you press that. And then you guys can see the stability control right next to it. And then we have the shifter for that CVT where you can manually shift if you want for some reason. And, pretty cool with the aesthetic and the functionality on that. Parking brake auto hold. Couple cup holders. And then you can see the center console with the nice padding and stitching on it. And decent storage space. And then notice that, again, that padding and stitching there on the dash as well. There's another plus. And a little bit different than what you have in the door panel, but still pretty solid. And then you've got the glove box set up. And then popping up to the top, again, manual mirror dimmer. It's kind of a thing for this segment. I'll make sure they have it. And then regular headliner, nothing crazy happening with that. Normal sun visors. Toyota keeps things practical, right? Now here's the window sticker for this Corolla. So you guys can see with the equipment here. And notice the base price is pretty similar with both of the vehicles. So that's fine, right? And again, this one's got like that nightshade package that's all blacked out. But notice again, total price, a little bit more, over almost $25,000. But I mean, it's not a big enough price difference for me to be like, oh, they're completely different packages, different segments, all that kind of stuff. They're so close in price that this is, like it says, as comparable as it gets, in my opinion. So here's what I have to say. I think the Corolla looks better on the outside, right? This is kind of funny. So I think the Civic looks better when it's a sedan, and the Corolla doesn't, whereas the Corolla looks better as a hatch and the Civic doesn't. That's kind of, it's weird, but that's how it is. Corolla has more power, more torque, but you can get a manual with the turbocharged engine in the Civic, and I would prefer that engine to the manual with the 2-liter that you have in the Corolla. So it just depends on what powertrain you're getting. But if we're looking at those two powertrains, the Corolla has a better powertrain. And then from an interior perspective, it's kind of a mixed box. So the Corolla overall has a nicer interior, but the Civic has certain elements like the gauge cluster and the dash that I think look more aesthetically pleasing, especially with how they've done the vent design. So again, it's kind of like a mixed bag in terms of which one is better. And then from a driving perspective, the Corolla kind of drives sportier. It drives similar to what the old Civic hatchback drove like, whereas the Civic now drives a little bit more on the luxury side of things. So it would depend on what you want from that perspective. So again, it's very close. This is a very competitive segment. I want you guys to let me know which one you would pick, but that's kind of like the pros and cons of both of them.